Mr. Chairman, whereas the Falls Church City School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.23711B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Falls Church Public School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion covering the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Castillo. And Mr. Kimball, if you would.
Absolutely.
Roll.
Mr. Ankuma?
Aye.
Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger?
Yes.
Ms. Ward?
Yes.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right, and on to the next step would be public comment. And 4.01, public comment in accordance with School Board Bylaw 2.30. The time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Additional written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to the board members and for the record. Dissemination of request access. So is there any comment, public comments for this evening? I do not have any.
All speakers, please.
I'll put one out after, is that okay?
And just please identify yourself and your
Certainly.
address.
Good evening, Mr. Webb, Mr. Reitinger, members of the board. My name is Robert Hoff. I live at 300 Riley Street in the City of Falls Church. I'd like to ask you all for the following in concert with your colleagues on the City Council. I did ask this of the City Council yesterday at last night's meeting. I asked that we provide funding for adoption and implementation of child sexual abuse curriculum for all students pre-K through grade 12. Provide funding for adoption and implementation of child sexual abuse and Title IX professional development programs for all teachers and staff members and administrators. And demand accountable, clear, and concise messaging to our community that is inclusive of all known facts that can be and should be made public from our schools and government officials. The safety of our children is a responsibility of all adults, and the primary obligation to protect children from sexual abuse lies with adults. We have a very sacred obligation to the children in this community to protect them, educate them, and to do everything we can to make sure they have lives that are productive and not impacted by fear or child sexual abuse. It would be the actions taken and sustained that demonstrate our acceptance of this responsibility. Thank you for your time. Does anyone have, I'll be happy to take any questions. I did have some questions last night, but no. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
You're welcome.
Are there any other comments before we move on to the business action items? All right. If not, thank you all very much. All right, we're going to move on to business action and information 5.01. And I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone through several months of a very transparent budget process. You have been able to build a budget from the bottom up, looking at every aspect from personnel to operations. And as we know, we've also seen some changes with regard to our revenues. Staying within city guidance, we were able to accomplish almost all the goals that you set forward. Being able to attend to the needs of our employees as best as we can, being able to address the absolute required needs to provide necessary special education services. Going beyond that 2.7 guidance, we've listed for you our unmet needs. And I would just point out that we have many unmet needs. We've provided justification for each and every one of those unmet needs. And even with those unmet needs, you know that the kind of funding that the school board has received over the last several years has not kept pace with either the enrollments, nor has it kept pace with needs in a variety of areas. But we also are cognizant of the fact that the city has limited resources to fund all of its functions. So we provided you a series of tiers of recommended positions. And I would say, once again, that they're all needed. Because when a district is growing like this one is, and given the complexity of our school systems today, the way they were staffed 5 years ago is not the same way they were staffed 10 years ago nor 15 years ago. There are needs that are identified that we can justify. Absolutely. We want to maintain our class size policies. We need to go over our budget in order to try to assure that for kindergarten. We want to be able to assure that the people who are in top level positions are not spread so thinly so that anything is not being attended to as it should be. Certain positions were identified through a recent ESOL study. Certainly, as our demands are met with regard to assuring gifted and talented students, and that we are meeting the demands of our ESOL students. We know that there's greater need in order to provide comprehensive services for all special education. We also have a great need in order to provide the type of services for our increasing numbers of staff members. But the point before you tonight, your challenge, is to determine the adoption of the amount of money to ask from the city. And it's not a cherry picking or a line item budget, but rather it's a total sum that you can request from the city. And then the school board chair and staff will do their level best to communicate this with the city. I think the city council members and mayor have been at a number of our presentations, particularly the PTA hosted budget thing. And I don't think there's anyone who's in an elected position in this city does not understand what the needs are for the school district, what level they're able to support it with the resources, what we'll learn in the future. So I feel very proud and stand by the budget that we've recommended. You now need to just determine the amount of money to request from the city.
Thank you, Dr. Schiller. Are there any questions of staff or comments before we move forward? Mr. Castillo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had some ongoing discussions about this difficult choice that we're facing with respect to a CTE, GT, ESOL position relative to an HR position. My understanding is it was the latter that was recommended by the superintendent on the last go-around. I've expressed that I have concerns about not having a dedicated HR resource. I would note that our colleagues in general government have an HR department with 2.5 people. I looked around at local school divisions, and I didn't see anyone that didn't have a dedicated HR director and HR department. I think, as I circulated earlier, having an HR resource could open up time and resources for people who are very pressed in terms of program, special education, so that we can kill two birds with one stone and increase the effectiveness of our programs with respect to special education, ESOL, CTE, and GT, while also addressing what I view as significant risks by not having dedicated HR resource.
To your point, Mr. Castillo and members of the board, I did some research over the weekend into the history of hiring in the district. We sent to you, I think, some very telling statistics with regard to the number of staff that we have on board, we process, hire. One of the other things is that we went back to 2005. There was an HR director as well as an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction. In 2012, if my memory serves me correctly, in an effort to consolidate positions, the position of HR was consolidated upon retirement with the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction. I also went back and researched the 2014 Gibson study that looked at your entire district. It did not study, it did not examine, nor did it recommend organizational structure, but it did make particular note that given fiscal circumstances, that there had been a number of positions that had been consolidated. So clearly, 2005, someone have to help me, what was the population then here? 1,000 students.
Oh, students? Oh, students.
2,000.
Less than
2,000. There was a recognition then about the need for specificity in discrete positions. But, you know, we are much more complicated than ever before, and the need for someone to be able to be focused on gifted and talented education and English for a second language speakers, as well as someone for the very specific needs of HR. It was recognized earlier, and I think you all recognize the need. It's just a question of how, indeed, it would be funded.
Mr. Nkoma?
So, while I hear what Mr. Castillo is saying, and we were all here last week sort of debating, do we get an HR director, do we get someone to coordinate ESOL and all of that. On further reflection and with the rate at which new information keeps coming in, my proposal would be that we focus on establishing the budget amount, and then it being a budget, I'm presuming between now and when we actually get the okay from City Council in a couple of months, we sort of work through that to determine what really works, and leave the superintendent and his staff to sort of determine, all right, do we do half and half, do we do more of one and less of the other, back and forth, but focus on getting the funding so that we're positioning ourselves to be able to take advantage of whatever, that rather than debating the merits and demerits of CTE versus HR. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just have a question.
Ms. Ward?
Can we submit a budget that is not earmarked with how we're going to spend it? I mean, we can do that, right? We don't have to. Okay, just checking.
It's a dollar figure.
Mr. Reidinger?
I'm generally, I think, in accord with what Mr. Nkuma said. The main thing that we need to put forward is the total amount. I agree. I think we need at least 3 more positions in the central office, and probably this year. We need the program coordinator, we need somebody to do HR, and we need an assistant special education director. But I think the amount we've landed on is sort of one position. While it's up or down $10,000, what we're really asking for is an additional FTE that's absolutely required to help with program pieces. My personal view is, since it's written this way, as the ESOL coordinator, I think that's and a CTE coordinator. That feels to me like a valuable thing, a case for which a position for which a strong case can be made. But generally, to your point, Mr. Castillo, as Mr. Nkuma said, my view is that we need to leave flexibility in the superintendent's office to adjust responsibilities, org charts, and staffing to be able to best meet school needs. So I don't think if we pass the budget as is that it will prejudice the current superintendent or a permanent superintendent when they come in any way to adjust with the board's approval the right allocation of people. So I think I'm in fully accord with Mr. Nkuma.
Ms. Gill?
And I also agree with Mr. Reidinger and Mr. Nkuma. My priority really is to get someone in here to help with the ESOL program, whether that in the superintendent's discretion is a 0.5 upon further reflection, if that can achieve what we need, and 0.5 could go to more to HR. I would leave it to our leadership to best organize the department using the resources that we have.
Mr. Lawrence?
I've got sort of a different overall view on the budget, but just on this point, I think central office definitely needs help. The numbers that we were sent show just what the burden is in HR, and we need to make sure that we've got our policies straight. Last month we sat here and told the superintendent and told our council that we wanted to look at policies, and the first thing was personnel. So, we recognize that it needs work. But leaving flexibility, I think would be good. But I'll be honest, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, my inclination right now is not to go above guidance, given Mount Daniel and everything else, and I can explain that later, but I think the flexibility idea is a fine one.
Anyone else?
I like the idea of flexibility too. I mean, if we were going to vote tonight, I would strongly suggest, I'm sorry, I mean, if we're voting on specifically, if we were going to argue this point, sorry, it's been a long day. If we were to vote specifically on that position, whether it be ESOL or HR, after learning more about what the position, the HR position would entail, I found that it would not just cover HR, but it would also deal with Title IX, which would also then free up our Director of Special Education, which would, she asked for an assistant herself, and that's obviously in Tier 3, it's not going to happen. So in this way, if we earmark those funds for an HR assistant, we'd be able to offset some of the special education director's duties. We would be able to then free Ms. High up to do what she's been doing for so long and so well, and that would be program director for ESOL and among other duties. And I can tell you, having been on the ESOL committee for the last 3 years as liaison, I've just seen incredible work done by this committee. I've seen incredible work done by Ms. High, by Ms. Seabridge, by the teachers. ESOL's doing a bang-up job. They really are in all levels. So I think I would like to see Ms. High continue. If that is an option for her, I would like to see her continue doing the work that she's been doing so well for so long.
Anyone else?
I just have a question. When do we have to have our budget locked down? How much longer can we go in this fashion? And then the second question is, what additional information do we need to determine whether or not we need dedicated HR support or not?
I know we're, refer to Dr. Schiller, but I know we're right, not letting us right at when we need to get it over to the manager, which I believe his presentation is on the 12th, 13th.
Yeah, today is the deadline for us to present a budget to that.
Mr. Reiniger?
I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. Although it looks like I'm locking up. I think my recommendation would be that we include in the budget the FTE that is there already, which is the program coordinator, but that we recognize that the administration has the flexibility to reallocate positions, and particularly with a new superintendent coming on board, that he or she, when that person comes on board, may want to have a say in the process, and in the interim, Dr. Schiller may want to move people around in a more efficient way. And that can either be done according to the discretion that lies in the superintendent, or if it requires school board approval, we'll seek school board approval. So I'm not suggesting that we kick the can down the road, just that we ask for one FTE. I'd suggest that to the extent it has to be labeled, that it be labeled as the program coordinator as we have right now. But I'm not, I don't feel it is a locked-in stone decision.
Mr. Lawrence?
Actually, a question for Hunter. Obviously, if we specify things now and we get the money, then the superintendent can go forward without coming back to us for any sort of approval or anything. If we did what Phil suggested, which is put one position in, and then the next superintendent or the interim wants to change that, does that have to come back to us as a reprogramming because we specifically voted on something different?
Well, what you're voting on tonight is, as Dr. Schiller said, a number. I think at this point there's broad recognition and public record that there is not really consensus on what that central office position looks like. And in fact, we could relabel that position one central office position.
Right, not to exceed.
Whatever.
Higher dollar amount is of the two.
And that it be specifically be brought back to the board once the budget is approved by City Council to determine the nature of that position.
Okay, well, I'm not suggesting it needs to get brought back. My question was, if we approved one, would that require that it get brought back if it was something different? And your short answer was no. But there's another way to do it where we wouldn't have to specify, and that would still keep the flexibility, but it wouldn't be pretending that we weren't picking one.
Well, I'll tell you from a purely mechanical standpoint, and I think Mr. Reidinger is very appreciative of this. The process would be, assuming that the board, approves what was discussed, or a number, say the 3.7% option tonight. It then would go to the city manager, would go to the council, will be discussed. The council will vote on a number for the school board to the transfer to the school operating budget on April the 25th, I think, somewhere thereabouts. At which point we now have a number. Okay, we would then, at the next board meeting or the first board meeting in May, bring back the budget to the school board. Even if the school board's dollar amount were required, we would bring to the board a specific budget document. And depending on which position was funded, the dollar amounts would change. It would be in one cost center if it were the CTE ESOL specialist. It would be in a different cost center if it were an HR. So that really, we would seek guidance from the school board at that point. What needs to be in that document that we bring forward to you for final approval then in May?
That's the real budget vote.
That is the real budget. This is your revenue vote.
This is a budget request vote.
Correct.
Okay, so mechanically, if we made it a central office position as opposed to one of the two?
Well, and honestly, because we want to get back into the practice of bringing to the board a budget document upon which to vote, we would need clarification from the board prior to the May whatever
right,
meeting.
For the final vote.
Right.
Right, but doing that tonight wouldn't.
It doesn't matter. Right. It matters not.
Mr. Ancona?
So if I may make a suggestion to keep things moving, I would just plug in central office support, whether it's 200,000 or 20,000, just plug in that number to round up our budget and call it good. How's that?
I like that.
I'm concerned that there may be some, the community may not find that to be transparent enough, and I think that we should allocate it to a position.
Well, we could specifically say central office support for one of these two positions. I mean, making it transparent isn't difficult.
Well, I would say it's more transparent to say we haven't decided it.
But I don't know if we have to say, we haven't taken a vote. If we haven't decided it, we're not.
I would support not designating it for a particular purpose, and I would not support designating it for a purpose and saying that we're going to change it.
Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought of it that way. Designating it one way and then saying it might change is pretty much the opposite of transparency when you think about it, because you're saying we're going this way all the while knowing that you may very well go the other way. So I would say, if anything, make it central office and then specify the two positions that, it could be split between. I mean, if that's not transparent, I don't know what would be.
How interested is the city council in the details of our budget?
No, it's not. I mean,
as a city council, they cannot cherry pick. They approve a total amount to the board, and then it's at the board's discretion at that point to determine how the funds are spent.
Yeah, city council only appropriates. We decide.
So that what we put in there is not as important to them as the amount.
As the amount.
As the amount. Yeah, all they want
So
is
that
one
doesn't
number.
have
So like I
any
said,
influence, it doesn't have any influence over how much they're going to approve at all. I mean, it's not that they can tell us what to put in here, but they can look and see what we do have in here and say, you know what, what's that all about? You know, I don't know, like, I
And they
don't
may,
know.
they may not.
So I don't know what the history is with that, or if that's, if there is a history, or if there is a protocol or
Well,
anything.
I do know at budget meetings, joint meetings between the board and the council, at sometimes they have reached a point where council members begin to question the efficacy and the need for certain positions and dollar amounts and things like that, at which point we have always reminded them that the city charter clearly indicates they do not have line item authority over the school board's budget. They are there to approve or not approve a certain amount.
Oh, and they also have the explanations that Dr. Schiller put together for all the necessary, right? They have all that.
Yes.
They will have that when we do our part of the presentation on the 13th.
Okay, good.
So I go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Reitinger?
I'm fairly comfortable. It's not a question of lack of transparency or saying we might switch it. The discretion, I think, always lies in the superintendent's office to request a reshuffling of resources. And as we get a new superintendent, or as Dr. Schiller gets more comfortable with the environment, I think he or the incoming superintendent may want to move responsibilities around. That said, I don't think it would be a good idea to put forward a budget where the specific justification was central office position, which looks like it's something easy to cut. I think the case is strongest for the program coordinator. I think that's what we need, and so if we're going to, in a budget, and I think we ought to have at least what our view on the position is, then I'm going to vote for the program coordinator.
Now, I see your point, but if we moved the human resources director back in, that's actually, it's a little more money, and in the event that that's the route we do go, we wouldn't have that money in the budget, so maybe it would be better to move that into that position. And again, and I would, last week, I did not ask you this in the most graceful way, Ms. Hyde, but the point I was trying to make, I was tired, I get tired by 9. The point I was trying to make is, rather the information I was trying to elicit from you was whether or not your position that you have now as doing, you're currently the person who does the ESOL and all the program coordination. Would you mind just elaborating a little bit on that and how, like, if you had an assistant human resources, would you be able to just elaborate? Is that okay? I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want Mr. Reitinger to get mad at me again or yell at me. But I don't like getting yelled at. But just to give us, the board and the citizens who might be watching, how that would play out. Does that make sense? Do you need me to elaborate on what I want this time? Okay.
I know what you're asking.
Thank you.
As I shared last week, because I supervise both the human resources and the curriculum side of the, which are both essential positions of the division, I didn't want to say which one I need more because both of them are very critical. I have a very strong curriculum staff who right now I feel have looked at the ESOL audit and have been moving forward in the recommendations that came out of the audit. And so, not to say that we wouldn't do more if we had that ESOL, CTE, GT program specialist, but I feel like as a team, we are strong enough to manage that. With HR, my background is instruction. I did the normal route, teaching, principal, served as HR. When I interviewed for the position, one of the reasons that I've been told that I was selected for the HR position is because I had a school background. So there are things that, are happening in HR as far as, us continuing to grow staff members. So there are some needs there as far as compliance things that we would like to do better. We continue every day to look at our practices, both on the curriculum and the HR side, to see how we can continue to move better. So I feel like either position that the school board approves or moves forward or is funded, we will either reorganize the current staff that we have to try to make sure that we meet the needs of the organization, because that's ultimately what we need to do. So I hope I've answered that.
And I just want one clarification. Would the assistant HR position, would they be responsible for all Title IX?
They would be dealing with if there was a situation where it was Title IX regarding staff. Ms. Germer does Title IX regarding students. Now, she and I collaborate on Title IX and working with Ms. Minson to make sure that we are, in compliance with all of that. So depending on the position, yes, if the assistant director of HR were hired, that would be someone to help with some of those higher level things. Right now, in curriculum, I do have a higher level director type person who is able to help with that. In HR, it is me, and I have a great support staff, but they are not decision makers. I have to make those decisions, so therefore, I'm finding a balance between curriculum when I'm out doing it, which is what I love, and making sure that I'm available for the staff needs.
Ms. Francoma?
Thank you.
Ms. Francoma? So, I'm trying to get some compromise here, but to the extent, here's the first thing I want to understand. Whatever money we get and whatever positions we've identified, those can be changed by the superintendent, right? As the school's needs demand. So these numbers are not set in stone. Looking at the tier beyond to what gets us to where we want to go, Assistant Human Resources Director position is outside what I think could, at least it's out, and we have it right here. It's outside, it's beyond the 3.7 mark, right? So why don't we approve the budget as is, with the understanding that when we get the number, superintendent reserves the right to make any readjustments as needed. That way we can vote on what we have here.
Right, correct.
That would be the budget that we brought forward to the board in May with that specificity, sir.
So this way, everything is laid out, it gets up there, but you reserve the right with any information, with any additional information between now and then.
Based on your approval.
Absolutely, to go to task and figure it out. Would that help?
I would just respectfully point out that a week ago at this time, it was the HR position that Dr. Schiller and his team designated as the higher priority. So I don't know what's changed in the last week, and again, I'll say it again, I see substantial risk in not addressing this area thoroughly. And I am happy to realign priorities, but I'll say it again, I'll support a placeholder slot, but I will not support a designated spot that we're not really seriously entertaining not changing, because again, I don't think that's transparent. If we're going to change it, let's say so. If we're not going to change it, let's say so. If we might change it, let's say so.
Ms. Gill?
I think there's been a recognition recently that we may need to look at our central office staff and reorganize the staff based along, now that our programs have changed and things have happened, maybe it needs to take some more. I'm not in the office, so I don't know, but if it needs to take more HR, and so, we reorganized, and if we had the program specialist, we could have that person taking over the ESOL responsibilities. And I don't know what the outcome of that would be. I think that the ESOL position is absolutely crucial. Our students are performing at a level below Virginia state standards. That to me is unacceptable for such a high-performing district. And the fact that we have no one coordinating this program, we have no one doing parent outreach. I know it's on your plate, but that is not your job. I have to put these kids first, especially in the current environment. They've got concerns about whether or not they're going to stay in this country. They shouldn't have concerns about whether or not they're going to get the education they need while they're here, before they get to stay here. So that to me is very important. But I leave it to Dr. Schiller's discretion. If you start to look at, or the next superintendent looks at our central office and says, listen, I can reorganize it this way, and as it turns out, we only need a 0.5 ESOL specialist, and we could use 0.5 for HR, I leave that to your discretion. I think that's a decision we can't make before we turn into the city manager.
If I may, this district has not had the resources to to do the deep dive into the organization and its protocols. Last year, you were able to fund an ESOL study, okay? Periodically, organizations need to take a hard look at what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, when they're doing it, and to make some adjustments accordingly. I don't believe that's been done here for a period of time. I do think it would be in the best interest of your new superintendent to either be charged with doing that or charge someone else to do that before the new superintendent comes on board, so the new superintendent would have the recommendations to go forward. A number of districts take a hard, deep look at organizational structures and protocols as a run-up to the hiring of a new superintendent, so the new superintendent doesn't have to start day one looking at those things, but rather can take whatever has been done and recommendations and put that into effect. And so there are program studies that we've talked about, like special ed, or deep dives into the protocols of, say, HR, and you've not enjoyed being able to do that because the resources have been there.
So I agree with Ms. Gill about supporting our ESOL students, and the struggling students are near and dear to my heart, but I also believe in striking a balance and trying to cover as many of our needs as we can in the most fiscally responsible way we can without cutting any one particular area off. I just see that an HR person would alleviate a lot of those duties from Ms. High, allowing her to do what that ESOL coordinator would be hired to do, and basically continue in more depth. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I'm seeing, that you would be able to do more of what the program coordinator would be doing if we hired someone brand new. And how many, anyway, that's it. I just don't want it to seem like I'm callous and I don't care about this group of students, because I really do. I just have to balance competing interests, and that's what I'm trying to do here.
I would just say from this perspective that I wouldn't speak about Virginia because I've only done one consulting study in Virginia. But if I look at the benchmark of around the nation of school districts, you will find school districts having a distinct, discrete HR function, and you will also have, given the growth of English ESOL students, you have school districts who have a dedicated person for that area. We have said before, we have a lot of unmet needs. And I'm not even speaking about the need for assistant help in special ed. I can speak as passionately about that as I can for any of these other positions. I would just say that districts, particularly as diverse as we are, and also as growing, is that you're going to be faced each year with this challenge of how do we provide adequate services and as a school board to protect yourselves that all students and faculty, staff are being well served. And so I think the argument we're having around this table is one common point of agreement. This district needs some resources and support in a variety of areas. How to get at that, to get the resources to do it, is what the struggle is.
Mr. Engelmann?
At this point, can we do two things? Look at the number, and if we're all in agreement, or decide as a board what number we're getting over to city council, because that's what we're voting on here. I think this is important, but not urgent. And if we're giving the superintendent the ability to rejig this eventually, then let's move on with the number. We'll get back to the details later. That would be my proposal to move forward with the number.
And I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier about the number should be the higher number, the one that is ascribed to the assistant human resources director. It's like a difference of $31,000. if we don't account for that in the budget and we decide to go that route, we won't have the money to pay for them unless we put it in the budget, right? So it's not gonna come out.
Could you repeat the question?
So, by taking out the Assistant Human Resources Director and placing it with the program specialist, the difference is about $31,000. So if we don't ask for that additional $31,000.
It's actually $11,000.
11?
Yeah.
It looked like,
It-
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I was looking at the special ed. But regardless, we still won't have that if we decide to go the route of hiring Assistant Human Resources Director. We won't have that $11,000 if we don't add it.
You know, at this point, that would be a gap, a deficit,
Yeah.
assuming you were going to
If
do
we're gonna
that.
vote on it, or if we can just, put that amount in there and then put, as someone suggested, like a non-designated position, just central office.
And if the board were to do that, we would just simply need to increase the amounts in the motion upwards by $11,000.
Ms. Nicolo?
I don't know how to phrase this, but can I make a motion?
There is one.
Oh, there's one.
It's not on the table, but there's a motion that's.
It's on the board docs.
In the board docs.
Oh, but there's not one on the table.
No, that's what I said, there's not,
There's one available.
no, there's not a motion on the table
Okay.
currently.
Okay. I was going to move that we vote on the motion on the agenda.
So you're gonna, so this would be for the overall budget figure.
Yeah.
And then,
For me, it's not an as-is, it's not stuck in stone. I mean, it's not, the superintendent has the discretion, or we just argue that, has the discretion to move things around. So there's nothing set in stone here, as far as I'm concerned. We haven't even got the money, it's not here yet.
Word.
Is there a second?
Second.
did you make a
I
motion?
was just gonna say, did you reach for Michael?
Right, Mr. Chair, I move that the school board approve the submission to the city manager for the proposed 2017-18 operating fund budget in the amount of $50,708,200, which requires a city appropriation of $41,178,000.
Second.
All right, just gonna be any further discussion, and I seem to have had your hand up. Yes, Mr. Barnes.
I know this isn't gonna be popular or even close to successful. Ever since Mount Daniel came in last week, another 2.1 million we have to ask for from the city for next year. I've really come around to not thinking we can go over guidance this year. And there are a lot of reasons to go over, and every single position that goes to 3.7 and above is completely justified. I just think with an additional 2.1 on Mount Daniel, we've got the Fellows property, we've got GM, which is, staring us in the face. I think to go above and beyond would just be asking too much. So, it would not make anybody happy, but my idea was to take the custodians down to 1, to take the clerical support for Jesse Thackeray, the ESOL teacher at TJ, and then restore para funding at Mount Daniel. And that left us about 36 in the hole, and then I was going to suggest taking that from our contingency, which would get us to 0. It would not fund world language, kindergarten teacher, kindergarten para, either HR or the central office ESOL person. But I really think, and I'm, you know me, I'm the first one to say, let's go storm the barricades. I think this year it would be asking too much. So I'll be voting against Mr. Ankuma's budget. If anybody has support for mine, I'd be happy to offer it as an amendment, but I think I probably know where it's going to land. But I just wanted to make it clear that there is a point where we're going to be asking too much. And I just want to go through what we did last year. So I just want to explain why I'll be voting against the proposal.
And
Other comments?
I just have a clarification. So if we vote on the budget as it is, with including the tier 1, we can amend it afterwards to add the difference in cost between those two positions? Or do we have to do that now before we vote?
You would have to do it now before you vote, because what the board requests will go to the city manager. And in accordance with the city charter, the city manager is required to include the board's ask in his recommended budget. It then goes to the city council for examination and approval. And there would be no indication that the city council would approve $11,000 more than the school board requested initially.
So it has to, what we approve now has to be exactly what we asked for, but cannot be amended after the fact. It can be done by way of amendment.
It could be, it would be not as clean. Before it goes to the city council for their final vote, if it was somehow explained to them and we were able to convince enough people, it's a possibility, but that gets very messy.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? My only comments right now, I hear you, Mr. Lawrence, and I, to some degree, get your proposal, but I think we are trying to make every effort that we can on our side to lower that ultimate request that we're going to have to ask for Mount Daniel. Yes, it was very disappointing of getting that news and going before council last night. I really took one for the team.
He did.
But I expressing that, we are at a point that we had a delay of a year. It wasn't something that we planned for. It wasn't something that we thought was going to happen before we took that proposal to the asking general government to approve bond. But I think, as I told them last night, when anything is delayed for a year, more than likely there is a big, just correct, 2 years, you're going to take a hit. I thought they came back on the high side, and talking with Dr. Schiller, I know he's doing everything he can to go back to folks and bring that down some. Are we going to bring it back down to where it was? I will be completely honest, that won't happen. But I think there could potentially be some additional savings that are there that we could do. Talking with Hunter, showing last night some potential savings that we may have from the TJ HVAC project could bring it down a lower number from that 2.1 million. So I think we're making those efforts. I think puts us in a better place to go to council, because I think with good faith, we did try this year to take a much lower CIP number to them, recognizing that we have a lot of big projects on the horizon, namely the high school. But that unforeseen setback did come. But I have hesitations to, ultimately we have the things in place for the 2.7%, if ultimately that is what we get, so we don't have to go back and do that exercise that none of us enjoyed last year. So we have it in place right now, if that's ultimately what we end up with. But I think some of these positions are critical, in particular trying to keep class size down. I think we would not be doing our due diligence and what the citizens here expect us to kind of maintain the small class sizes and be ultimately, in my opinion, reasonable in what our ask is. As I said before, when we were talking during the budget of where do we go, and I said, caution everyone, I think we are going to have, but let's be very careful of what we ask for and be able to justify those things. And I think we've been able to do that. So that's why I would support where we are on the ask that we have now. And like I said, where we're talking about the HR position and the ESOL coordinator position, I think there's still, we're putting a number out there. But ultimately, I think we still have time to have some of the discussions about how to, and giving that superintendent the flexibility to do that. Because I will say, I am a little different from where I was last week of the position. So I think the HR position, because of things happening, I do want to make sure that we're in the best position that we can be with regard to how our HR functions are happening here with the schools. And any other, yes,
Two
sir.
questions then. First, I guess, whether Michael's gonna add the 11,000 for Margaret, but we're sending over this. I mean, at least, down to here to the city council. So which position are we putting in
For the,
for the central office? Because we can't, we can say we're approving just a number, and we are, but if we're sending documents like
I was
this.
just going to say,
We still need
Yeah,
to,
should we send this to?
Yeah. yeah, I mean, we're
Senator,
sending
what's the procedure of what we said? Mr. Kemmer.
You can send, at a minimum, all you have to send are the budget motions themselves. We have traditionally provided, budget books and budget materials that provide detail in terms of what is behind the ask specifically. I'm thinking we're probably getting back to the question of what is identified in the material, in this supporting materials.
Right.
And, whether it's a this or that or a either or, happy to do whatever the board wants to do. But really, at this point, it's the number that is most critical. And honestly, perhaps, the final outcome in terms of, which position, is most needed or most important may come from a dialogue between the school board and the city council members. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, the reason I'm for the motion on the table, or the motion on the agenda, is because it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. With the same folks asking for transparency to the community, if we cannot decide, let's put a placeholder in. But if we want a number, we can either leave the CT coordinator in there as is and go with what we have. But any attempt to add $11,000 then smacks of, all right, exactly what are you trying to do? Is it the CTE, or are we trying to throw in a placeholder for the HR director? So it's one of two things. We either go with what we have, or we just put a blanket placeholder and say, don't give it a name. And I think we're being transparent with the community. This isn't an attempt to deceive the community. This is an attempt to let the community know these are tough choices that don't have to be made now. They can be made within the next couple of months. So what we call it is not relevant, it's getting the money. That's what we need to focus on.
And I agree, and I totally agree on the money, and that's where I just want that, whatever that position is, to be funded so we don't hamstring central office or the superintendent when they decide what that money is going to pay for. If it does end up paying for an HR staff member, then we are going to be $11,000 short. So we really need to rejigger this budget and ask for that extra money, so we do not hamstring the superintendent. Because that's basically telling the superintendent, here's all you get, even though this is how much an HR person is going to cost you. So I can't vote for the budget the way it is.
Yeah, Michael, the question is, where would you find the $11,000 if the superintendent decided to do the other position? Because if you're not putting it in, it's not getting approved, and we're not getting it.
Hunter, could you let us know historically what your average overage or under has been on the budget on an annual basis? Give us 5 years.
Probably within $200,000 to $300,000.
I rest my case.
I'm not taking that chance.
I think for $11,000 in a $50 million budget, it's a rounding error. I mean, we're honestly wasting a lot of time doing this. Let's just vote and move along and leave the superintendent and empower the superintendent to do what he has to do. We're trying to do his job now.
By specifying the position.
I think
Hey, for $11,000.
why don't we replace those positions? Why don't we just flip them around and then we are not playing with the $11,000? I
Margaret,
don't
let's
see why.
leave it blank then. Now, nobody's committed.
You have to
I'm
amend your
concerned
motion,
about the amount of money that we're asking for. That's the bottom line. And I don't want to play around with this budget at all. I don't care if there is, there could be some leeway. I just don't know. I'm not psychic, and neither are you. So we have to plan for what we have in front of us. We have to work with what we have in front of us.
Okay, here's what we should do. Let's vote. The motion's up there. Let's vote on it. Kill it or let it go.
Mr. Campbell?
Point of order, so
Yes.
this, with respect to this personnel slot, this motion on the table specifies or does not specify the slot?
It specifies this amount. This is what I'm on my old motion for. This is the amount that is going to. This is the amount.
In truth, this motion specifies an amount of money. There are supporting documents that get you to that amount of money, but ultimately what is going over to the city manager and to the city council is a number. Now, there may be supporting documentation information, but they're not voting on individual positions, they're voting on a number. And Mr. Shields is not including individual positions in his budget, he's including a number to the school system. So in truth, really, the action the board is taking tonight is on a number.
But just for the record, that piece of supporting documentation designates, and it's not just so the community understands, it is not an ESOL position. It is a combined ESOL CTE GT position for transparency's sake. That's the position that is in the supporting
That drives that
documentation right
number
now.
for the school board. That leads the school board to that number.
It is a combined, that it could, leaving the superintendent's discretion of how to allocate for that either or both those positions. All right, if we're gonna go ahead and vote, Mr.
Call the question. Very good. Mr. Ankuma?
Aye.
Mr. Castillo?
No.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence?
No.
Mr. Reitinger?
Yes.
Ms. Ward?
No.
Mr. Webb?
Yes.
The motion passes. 4-3. That's never happened before.
All right, next up is the approval of submission to the city manager, the FY18 food services budget. Mr. Killer, you have any?
No, I think these are self-explanatory because of the fund sources. And so they are not part of our budget per se of money that's a direct transfer. They go into our budget, but they go into the specific fund source. And the food service, of course, is largely self-sustained. Yes, self-supporting.
I will entertain a motion for food services budget.
Mr. Chair, I move that the school board approve for submission to the city manager the proposed 2017-2018 food service budget with receipts and disbursements in the amount of $1,1,860,000.
A second?
Second.
Ms. Gill. Mr. Kimball?
Any discussion?
Any discussion or anything before we move on?
Mr. Ankuma?
Aye.
Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger?
Yes.
Ms. Ward?
Yes.
And Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. It passes unanimously.
And then on to 5.03, the FY18 community services budget.
Mr. Chair, I move that the school board approve for submission to the city manager the proposed 2017-2018 community services fund budget in the amount of $2.340200 million, requiring a total city appropriation of $107,500.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Kimball?
Certainly. Mr. Ankuma?
Aye.
Mr. Castillo?
Aye.
Ms. Gill?
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger?
Yes.
Ms. Ward?
Yes.
And Mr. Webb?
Yes.
Thank you. It passes unanimously.
We'll move on to 5.04, which is the discussion of superintendent search panel. For me, it was have a discussion as we begin the process of finding our permanent superintendent and being able to engage the community in this. Wanted to have a discussion with the board of how do we want to establish this group, discuss the potential when they would be brought into play with the discussions of the superintendent and the composition of the group. So wanted to open up the floor for that conversation. Any bits, Bill?
No, Mr. Lawrence, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna say, to me, I mean, we need to do this, and I think we all agreed on that a while ago. I think it's fairly simple. We need to bring in the SAOs, one person from each, the PTAs, SEEK, EEK, PEAK, Falls Church Education Foundation, band boosters, athletic boosters. I'm probably missing a couple, but, you know, the people who really have a stake in our schools, we need to bring them in with the appropriate confidentiality warnings and non-disclosure, whatever we need for the very end with the finalist or our finalists. But I think we need to do that.
I agree with everything Mr. Lawrence just said.
Any other comments on that? Mr. Castillo? Ms. Ward?
I'm just going to clarify, we are going to bring in that committee at, we're down to the final.
The finalists, with
One or two finalists.
whatever the number of finalists are, that's when that particular group would be for it. Mr. Castillo?
I would just suggest that we consult with the school board leadership in place at the time of our last superintendent search to find out what considerations they had, how they went about it, who was on it, just so that we have some historical perspective and understanding about how it worked the last time. I think that could inform our decisions. I don't know how many people total we're talking about here, but I think that would also be a good question to address. And then I think, you know, stating clearly what it is that we're soliciting from these citizens that will be important for our understanding as well as for theirs.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point, making it clear that we're asking for their input, but not asking them to make a decision for us is key.
And that is correct. I agree with that it is for input from the group to help us within our deliberation, but the ultimate decision of who the next superintendent will be our decision to make. And I believe Ms. Wadisca has provided some information, but I will reach out to her and try to set up time to talk with her a little bit about what they did for that aspect of it the last time we were having a search.
Yeah, I think last time they included pretty much the same groups. I think the difference was they did it more at the last second, which made it a little more challenging. So I think what we're doing is largely what they did, only quite a bit ahead of
having it prepared before having to scramble to pull folks in.
Right.
Mr. Reitinger?
I think we're all in violent agreement for once. I agree very much with both Mr. Castillo and Mr. Lawrence just said. It seems to me that we ought to talk to Ms. Wadisca or someone else on the board to get the list of people who's doing it. And we ought to write down the list of groups so we know exactly what we're voting off on rather than running through it in thin air. So, and perhaps even there ought to be a description of what the role and what the meeting would be like. But that strikes me as something we definitely want to do. I agree with Mr. Lawrence that I think got consensus on that. It's really just a question of the way you accomplish it and who's in the room.
Thank you all very much. And
Before we go on,
Mr. Reitinger.
Mr. Chairman, to the next item, I was wondering whether it would be appropriate to, and what the thought of the board was, on whether we should amend the agenda to have a separate closed session at the end of this meeting to continue the discussion in the closed session that we had at the start of the meeting. I know people want to get home, but I'm certainly willing to stay and have that conversation if people would be interested in having that conversation. All right. Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to amend the agenda to insert a second closed session after 5.05, the GM feasibility study, and before 6.01, adjourn with all the associated motions to go into the closed session and certification when we leave the closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And we'll now move on to 5.05, the GO feasibility study. Dr. Schiller.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, last night's city council meeting, city council, a vote of 7-0, passed the resolution, the motion that you see before you tonight, the issuance of the George Mason Architect Feasibility Study request for proposal. They set a budget for $1 million, I wish, of $100,000. So it would be appropriate for this board now to pass a similar motion so that we can adhere to the time frame that is set for the schedule.
Congratulated. Any comments? I would then entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the school board authorize the issuance of the George Mason High School Architect Feasibility Study request for proposal.
Second.
Mr. Kimball?
Oh, yeah. I'm getting ready for that second closed session.
Yes. Mr. Lawrence has a question before we vote.
We're authorizing the issuance, but we're not necessarily saying it is this language and only this language, correct?
Correct, far as I found. I believe, I guess, what do you mean that this language only this language?
Well, I've seen, things floating back and forth among the working group on the feasibility study language. So I guess my question is, are we voting to approve this specific language as the only language? We're just authorizing the issuance of
The latter, sir.
right, okay, perfect. And I'm fine.
With pleasure. Mr. Ankuma.
Aye.
Mr. Castillo. Ms. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger.
Yes.
Ms. Ward.
Yes.
And Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Great.
And we will now, just for the audience, we're going to go into the second closed session, where at this point, let me make sure before I say it, we'll have no other business that we're going to be having after that, then to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter personnel under Section 2.23711A1, in particular superintendent search.
Is there a second? Let's go.
Yes, Mr. Ankuma.
Aye.
Mr. Castillo. Ms. Gill.
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger.
Yes.
Ms. Ward. Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.